I found something that I've found that people don't talk about nearly enough. It costs money up front to even try to buy a house. And most people don't have $2,000 just to throw away. So, in this video, I'm going to share some things with you that can help you avoid wasting a lot of money. So, this should be very informative, but also I'm going to throw something at you to consider that in the lack of being aware of this, people often don't think about. And I find this when working with buyers in negotiations. And I try to stress it, but sometimes it takes a while for people to have the light bulb go on and grasp what it is that I'm trying to say. So hopefully this video will be very helpful for many of you in the future. When you put an offer in on a house and it gets agreed to, most people always focus on closing costs because the cost or the amount of money that you're going to have to write a check for at the closing table is a pretty significant amount of money. I mean, it can be up to $11,000, $12,000, maybe or more, depending on the kind of loan you have and that kind of thing. But it can certainly be a $10,000 venture at the closing table. Now, of course, it can be much less too. I mean, if you're a cash buyer, it could be $1,500. The bottom line is closing costs gets a lot of attention and a lot of focus when you talk about home buying transactions. I've found that people don't talk nearly enough about the upfront costs before you ever make it to the closing table. Why is this important? Think about what I just said. There are upfront costs, and it's a significant amount of money. Even the ballpark is significant, and you may never make it to the closing table. First thing is, 9 times out of 10, when you're buying a home, you're going to run inspections. Typical home inspection is going to cost you around $400. It could be a little bit less. It could definitely be a little bit more. Depends on the size of the home, the amount of structures that need to be inspected. There's a variety of things that can impact that price. But for your purposes for now, put in your head at least $400 home inspection. Next is going to be the termite pest slash wood inspection. These may seem redundant and seem like they overlap, and to an extent they do, but definitely at my recommendation, you're always going to want to get both because one, that termite inspection may be a contingency, your lender's requiring it, you're going to have it anyways, or it could just be a contingency in the contract which protects you. But B, the termite inspector is specialized. He's going under the house, looking at the structure of the house, and looking very specifically at the wood structure of the home for pest slash moisture issues. And so oftentimes he's going to see things and find things that the inspector may not have. The home inspector, in his time at the property, is searching everything from the roof all the way down to the foundation. So you want to have both there ideally. It's usually $150 to $200 for termite inspection, or at least in our area. I will say go ahead and anticipate, we'll say $175 wood inspection. Next is going to be the appraisal. And I really want to point this one out because people don't realize this a lot of times. Your lender is going to order an appraisal. Of course, we know that. We usually aren't caught off guard by that. The house needs to be appraised for them to be certain that the amount of money that they're loaning you equates to what the house is worth. What oftentimes people don't realize is that that appraisal is typically around, it can be $600. I've heard of them a little bit less. I've heard 450 just yesterday, but it was in another state. But I'm just going to tell you for here, plan for $600. Could be a little bit less, could be a little bit more. Again, these are all ballpark figures. And guess what? That is not always something that is rolled into your closing costs. A lot of times, this is something that a lender will order and charge for up front so they can get the appraisal released. So you just need to go ahead and plan for it. So you've got $600 for an appraisal. Now we're already almost at $1,200 in expenses, and we haven't even gotten into the variables. Your home inspector is not going to do a full chimney inspection. Your home inspector is not going to do a pool inspection. I mean, they'll take a look at it, but if you want a pool inspection, you're going to call a pool company to come do a pool inspection. That number can vary depending on a lot of circumstances also. Now, I'm going to be upfront. These ones that I'm going through now are not inspections that clients typically have done. They'll usually just rely on the home inspection. If there's not any major concerns pointed out, they won't get these, but there could be. And if you're the kind of buyer that wants to uncover every single stone, which is totally fine, you're making a large purchase, then just understand these are the associated costs. For pool inspection, the number can vary. It could be $100 to $300, depending on the size of the pool and obviously all these factors. But let's just call it $100. So regular standard pool inspection, $100. Chimney inspection, likewise. How many levels is the house? How complicated is it to inspect the chimney? Could change the cost. Let's just call it $200. Chimney inspection, $200. Those are the two big ones. A lot of the other issues that will come up, contractors will come evaluate and give an estimate for free. But those inspections, like a roofer, for example, we can call a roofer and get them on the roof and they'll come do an evaluation for free. But those inspections are going to be out of pocket costs and they're going to be upfront. So for all intents and purposes, let's call it $1,500. This number can get up to 2,000 real quick though. Why is this really important? There's two reasons. Number one is the obvious one. If you've never thought about these things, now you know. You need to have, if you're home shopping, this amount of cash, I'd say $2,000, set to the side in a reservoir just for inspection and appraisal purposes, for upfront cost for your transaction process so that you're not caught off guard by it. You're going to be prepared because you've seen this. You've been told about these potential costs up front. That money's set to the side. You're going to be good to go. But here's the other thing that you need to think about. And this is where I've found there's a blind spot with a lot of buyers. And I'm always trying to point this out. And it's good when I've had buyers have that moment where they're like, oh, you're right. That's a good point because this ties directly into your thought process in negotiations. A home buying process is always going to be give and take. Sellers are trying to get the most for their home that they reasonably can. Buyers are trying to get a home for the best deal that they possibly can. That's just the reality of it. Everybody wants to either make or save as much money as possible, and that's completely understandable. That's normal. But understanding that, realizing it's going to be give and take. And typically the seller has a little bit more control than the buyer does because the seller can just say, I think I can get more than what you're trying to give me. We're done here. I'm going to move on and find another buyer. Meaning the seller can find another buyer for the same house, but you, the buyer, only have that one particular house if it's that particular house. You can go find another house, but there's not another one of that house. Make sense? Now, that may not matter, but what does matter is if you go look for another house, all those numbers that we've gone through, you start all over again. So, what I'm saying is, if we get knee deep into the negotiating process in terms of repairs, all right? So, we're under contract. You've paid for a home inspection. You've paid for a termite inspection. You've paid for your appraisal. And a lot of times we hope the appraisal is not going to be ordered until we can get these things done. But the lenders are on a clock, they're on a crunch to get the loan done. So oftentimes they overlap. It's just the way that it is. You've now paid over $1,000. Maybe you had a pool inspection done. Let's say you're $1,300 into this transaction at this point, and some things came back that you don't like. You send a repairs list over to the seller and say, I want all of these items done. The seller says, no, I'm not doing all those. Maybe they say, I'm not doing any of them. Maybe they say, I'll do these couple, but I'm not doing the rest of it. You get that list back and say, well, you know what? Then I'm going to walk. This is what I tend to point out. I go through that list. I have a pretty general idea of what certain repairs are going to cost. I can look at a list and get an idea of about what you're going to be looking at. And a lot of times buyers will look at $1,000 worth of repairs that a contractor could come in and do for $1,000, $1,500, $1,700 and say, well, I want them to do these things. And the fact they're not willing to do these things because they're minor-ish is offensive to me. So I don't want to buy the house. What I try to point out is, remember, you've already gone $1,300 into this transaction. Now that $1,300 is gone and it's money well spent. You need to know what's going on with the home and you have to have the appraisal. But if we walk away and go to the next house, guess what? We start all over again. And so unless you just don't want this house, which usually people do or they wouldn't have put an offer in to begin with, why not just see what repairs they're going to be willing to do, take what we can get from them, and then on the give side, take the money that you're going to spend on the next house. And by the way, we're walking into the dark, into the wilderness. What if we end up in this same boat again? Now we go to the third house. I mean, we could be $3, $4, $5, $6, $7,000 deep and haven't even made it to a closing table yet. My humble opinion and suggestion is, unless you just don't want this property, why not consider that factor? Take the at least $600 to $1,500 that we know we're going to go right back around and have to spend again and just take that money and make these repairs that are on this list. And to me, that's a very logical way to look at the process. And so a lot of times when people get caught up in the emotion of buying and selling, I think that certain things get missed. And that's our job to point different things out to make sure that you're getting the most well rounded set of information possible so that you can make the best decisions for yourself. Go ahead and plan for $2,000 in upfront costs. This is not including closing costs, this is separate. Account for $2,000 in money that you're going to need for the purchase of your house. It may end up being less, it may end up being significantly less, but be prepared for that. And then when you get into the negotiation process on the repairs, depending on how that conversation is going, because sometimes it's smooth. Sometimes we send lists over and say, look, this, and this need to be repaired. The sellers, they look at it and say, yeah, I don't disagree with that. They get a contract over there and they get it done. Sometimes it's not that way. Sometimes there's some push and pull going on. And I'm just saying that if there is, while you're considering your position in those negotiations, remember the money you've already spent and the money you're going to have to spend. And in my opinion, my suggestion is take that amount of money, unless you just don't want this house anymore, and consider, okay, how many of these items can I pay for with the amount that I know I'm going to pay again if I go to the next house? And just write those off yourself and say, you know what, I'll take care of these because this amount of money is going to cover all of these. Are they covering enough of what's left to make it satisfactory? And if the answer is yes, then you probably just go ahead and finish that transaction, come to an agreement on the negotiations, and make it to the closing table and move on with whatever the next season of your life is in regards to that portion of your home shopping experience. So, look, I hope you found this helpful on multiple fronts. I hope that it prepared you for something that you may not have been prepared for. If you watched this far, then hopefully, you weren't calculating these things, and now you're not going to run into a wall that you didn't know was coming. But also, I hope it gave you something to think about. And so, if you find yourself wherever you're at in the country in repairs negotiations on a home, you factor this in. Because if you spend a month in negotiations on a house and then you walk away, you've also wasted a month of your time. And other homes that could have been of significant interest to you have possibly even come and gone. So this compartment of the whole puzzle that is a home buying process is often neglected, I think, and it's actually very valuable to unlock it and open it up and be able to process and think it through. It could help save you not only money, but also time and emotion and energy. And so I hope it made sense. If it did or didn't, please leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. I'll try to answer any question or clear up anything that I can. As always, I wish you all the best in your real estate endeavors. Y'all take care, and God willing, we'll see you in a future video.